folks. Thanks for joining us today. And with me is David Fallarme. He's most recently marketing leader for HubSpot in Asia, and he's led customer acquisition for several video games with millions of users, such as Electronic Arts. And he's even grown a B2B SaaS startup from 5 to multiple 7 figures in annual revenue. And if you didn't know, David also runs the APAC Marketing Roundtable. It is the most active community for marketing leaders in APAC. Thanks for joining us today, David.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, look, I'm just curious, in your opinion, what's been the biggest digital marketing trends that we are yet to see in the next 1 to 2 years?
I think the biggest shift that a lot of people have to make, whether you're B2B or B2C, is this idea that now we're all like hyper connected on social media. There's all these communities popping up. And I think a lot of people, at least in the tech world that I'm in, we're living in this world where people discover things through Google. Like you type something into Google, and you expect to see a website, and then you pop your email into something. Somebody sends you a couple of emails, maybe a salesperson calls you up. So that's how most people think about marketing, especially B2B marketing. But I think what's changing now is, LinkedIn is such a powerhouse. Like you're probably watching this on LinkedIn. That's now a part of your marketing strategy that you cannot avoid. Now there's all these communities. So I run a marketing community where we discuss, different products that we buy, how they think about stuff, agencies to hire. So I think the biggest shift that a lot of people are not paying enough attention to is this realization that we're moving away from just go on somebody's website and read everything there. Now that everybody's hyper connected through social media, through communities, newsletters, podcasts, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook groups, WhatsApp chat groups, that is now where a lot of marketing is happening between people as opposed to companies to people.
So who do you regard as best of breed B2C marketers, and what can the B2B world learn from them?
Yeah. So the reason I'm very passionate about this thing is I think if you're in the B2B world, you're typically thinking of everything about like MQLs, working with sales, or what's my next revenue target, or how many leads do we get? Do we grow the database? Are we emailing enough people? What's our conversion rate? So that's kind of the world and all the terms you think about. But that's very easy to get stuck in. You just think about B2B influencers. You just think about SEO. You think about, how sales closes deals. But there's this other world out there, the B2C world, that many people don't cross. And I've been lucky enough that I started my career in the B2C world, video games. I used to work at Hershey's Chocolate at some point, and then I transitioned over to B2B. So I've been lucky that I can see that underneath both B2B and B2C is just the same marketing principles. So I think the biggest thing people miss is just you are in a bubble, and accept that you're in a bubble. And if you want to improve your marketing skills, and take a peek outside of the bubble and see what are the B2C influencers talking about? What are they doing? So a couple of names that I'll drop here for people who feel like they can identify with this and think they're in the B2B world. There's a few professors that I think are doing a really good job of talking to the B2C FMCG consumer crowd. So that's Mark Ritson and Byron Sharp. So those are 2 professors. I think they're actually both based in Australia, but they're both really good. Yeah. But they're like globally recognized and renowned. So if you're in B2B, you probably have never heard these names. If you're in B2C, you're like, of course, Mark Ritson and Byron Sharp. Like it's obvious that I would say those 2 things. But that just goes to illustrate that people are in bubbles. B2C people are in a bubble of their own. And if they want to learn more, they can actually learn from B2B people. So that's a big thing that I think people need to realize.
Oh, okay. And now, marketing and change management, there's actually quite a few similarities. Often both of us feel like we're yelling into the void. When I'm trying to get a change off the ground, it feels really uneasy when all I hear back are crickets, or, there's no engagement. So this also applies to marketing. So what would you say to those that want to cut marketing efforts short?
You could cut marketing efforts short, but just know that you are going to sacrifice long-term gains for yourself. The reason that marketing can be very hard sometimes is because most people come from a sales background. So if you come from a sales background, you're very used to seeing really fast feedback cycles. I did 100 dials today and 5 of them became leads or whatever. Or I have 10 leads in the database and 20% of them became customers. So you're very used to seeing things in a very quantitative, here's the feedback loop. I know exactly when to get predictable cycle. More effort directly equals more results. But marketing, the annoying and the good thing about it is it's a bit squishier. And so if you don't accept that, then you're just never going to look at marketing the right way. So marketing is a game that I think is more medium to long term, where the sales world is more of like direct short-term action. And I think the best salespeople I've worked with are very like, okay, I'm just going to focus what's in front of me and I'm going to ignore everything else. And whereas marketing people, they can't do that. They have to think medium to long term, because the reason that if I'm a salesperson, I'm picking up the phone and dialing someone, they've heard of my brand, is because the marketing team did their job in terms of providing that air cover so that they've heard of the brand and they have positive affinity for it. So if you're going to be cutting off marketing, then you just know that you'll be maybe seeing some short-term benefits in terms of cost reduction, but the medium to long term is going to be very painful. So in terms of change management, it really takes that mindset shift of being comfortable with, I'm investing for the medium to long term. And that's why this is an important thing. A lot of companies don't do this. And that's one of the reasons why, if you're at a company with really good marketing, then everything is just going to be that much easier for you. Your sales team finds it easier to talk to people because they're already educated ahead of time. And people have affinity for your brand. So in many cases, people come to you. And that's what we saw with HubSpot. Our strategy is just to make sure we play the really, really long game. We educate, we add value, and we don't try to be like, hey, what are you going to buy? Like, we're not the hard sell type of company. So the outcome of that is, if you just look at HubSpot stock price, is proof of that strategy at play. Long term, make sure you are educating and adding value, and just trust that everything will fall into place in the long run.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. Marketing is all about communicating the value add, because at the end of the day, people often say, look, we're all selling something, but actually I don't think it's about the selling. I really think at the end of the day, we're all marketing something, whether it's our skills, our capabilities, our projects, or our passions. So what are some key learnings from your very long marketing career that can be used to help individuals market themselves more effectively?
Yeah, I think the thing that has benefited me the most is just thinking of myself as a company, like just really taking my personal brand, imagining I'm the CEO of my own personal brand. And then I'll even take it to the extreme where I have, quarterly reviews with myself. So I run a QBR on myself, just to be like, hey, how did I improve on my personal branding? Did I increase my follower size? And that doesn't always have to be the metric for yourself, where it doesn't always have to mean get more followers on LinkedIn. It could be whatever it means, but just with any business, you have to know what your objective is. That way you're in charge of your outcomes, as opposed to letting things happen to you. So I think people fall into a trap, especially when it comes to the middle stages of their career, when they haven't invested in that personal branding or knowing what their positioning is. So, I've been lucky that the last, let's call it 5 to 6 jobs, I haven't applied. I haven't done the resume spray and pray game, but that's because I've invested upfront in, like, what is my positioning? What should I be thinking about? How do I make sure I'm building up personal branding assets, so that down the future, those things are paying dividends for me? So I think that's the number one lesson. Think of yourself as the CEO of your own company, like you Inc. And then what would you then do as a result to achieve the objectives you want to achieve?
Amazing. And so what would you say for those people that are listening that have actually never done a QBR? What are their first baby steps,
Here's the thing, right? So most people watching this probably have been in a business where they've done some kind of QBR or monthly review or annual planning. So imagine all the steps you take there. So what is our goal for next year? So there's typically a process around that. Who do we need in place to achieve that goal? What resources do we need? What strategies do we need to put into place? So you actually already know the steps. But then sometimes taking that from the company level to the personal level can feel a bit unnatural, but it's actually all the same steps. So I do the same thing. So I'm doing my 2022 planning now, where I'm thinking, what are the things I want to do for myself next year? What are some really cool things to achieve? And then just work backwards into, therefore, I need to be setting this up. Therefore, I need to think about how I'm going to set up this resource. So I'll give you an example. So I run a marketing community called APAC Marketers Roundtable. And one of my objectives from last year, so 2020 going into 2021, was to launch a podcast. So this is why I have this mic here, because I knew like January, I knew I needed to set it up. I knew I needed to build a network so that I would have people to interview on the podcast. And so set yourself up for 1 year, 3 years down the line. I think that's a good start for most people. If you're really, really stuck there, I mean, just think the next quarter. So now we're recording this in September. Let's say December rolls around. Like, do you know what you want to be doing in January? So just always be thinking a few months ahead. So you're not just reacting things, and you're proactive, especially when it comes to something as important as your own career.
Awesome.